Okay, so let me share my screen. And we are now in our third week of these series on Microsoft Teams. And thank you, Kevin, for donating your time to a great cause. And not only that, but, you know, we're in this, I would say, almost paradigm at this point where Teams, after what, close to 14 years, Kevin, is finally gaining acceptance. And it's a great fit for the hybrid workforce, right? And it's a great fit. I mean, maybe not so much for, you know, hard phones and the traditional telephony, but obviously, you know, a collaboration tool to start. And of course, it includes the whole, you know, Microsoft 360, you know, tool set. And again, you know, it's gained in popularity. And I can tell you within the last 6 months, my experience with Teams has been in terms of quality and screen sharing has actually been very good. You know, and I was on another vendor's a little while ago, and I heard echo on the call, and you know, other variables that didn't make the experience as ease of use, so to speak. So Kevin's going to be talking to us today about the hybrid workforce and what's going on there and how Teams can play in that space. Okay, so, and again, just to give a little plug for Kevin here, Kevin is another independent consultant. He's not an Sctc member yet.
Yeah. The pitch is on. There you go.
But he has been focusing on Teams for many years. Kevin and I know each other quite well through BC Strategies. He and I are both experts through it. And Kevin does some of the best presentations with some of the best knowledge out there specific to Teams and other stuff. And he's got some very talented kids who I've also met at some of these BC Strategies conferences too. Although he hasn't brought his dog yet to the conference. So I'm waiting for that, Kevin. Maybe you can bring your dog to the Dallas conference in the fall. So we'll
okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, but Kevin is really the de facto expert out there. So we were pitching a job together not too long ago. Didn't quite come through fruition yet, but we'll see. And but yeah, Kevin is an extremely valuable resource and ethical as well. Okay, so with that, quick polling question for everybody. Okay, and where is this? Sorry, poll. Okay, so oh, I'm not logged in as the presenter. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to skip this today. Never mind. Sorry about that. I prepared these and I don't know why it's not allowing me in there. That's weird. Okay. Let me just try one more time. Yeah, for some reason, it doesn't have me registered. Okay. Okay, so many thanks to Kevin again for his insights on Microsoft Teams the last 2 weeks. Again, he's going to be doing another spin on it based upon a presentation he did to Microsoft just a few weeks ago in Toronto. Okay. And we'll be again, you know, talking about the market in a little while. And again, you know, if you have any aha moments or questions for Kevin, please put it into the chat bar, and he'd be glad to answer them. Okay. So some famous facts. Again, we're continuing with that theme this week. So does anybody want to guess how many payphones still exist in the United States?
4.
Close. Anybody else?
0.
Okay, it's actually 100,000.
Wow.
And at the peak of the 1990s, there were roughly 3.6 million payphones. And of the 100,000, this is what I love, 20% of them are in New York, of course. We still see them in New York City.
They're in Metropolis.
Now, the question is how many of those actually still work?
Wow.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, there was an incident. This goes back, you know, way a long time ago. But there was an area in downtown area of New York that got a huge cable cut and just took out an entire neighborhood. And they brought these payphones into the area on these wheels, and literally gave them to the neighborhood at no cost for this 3-week period. And they promised the PUC that they would have, you know, this service back up in 3 weeks, and people would have dial tone back in their homes. But in the meantime, they could make unlimited calls to throughout the US at no cost during that period. Okay. Well, that was fine, except they missed the deadline by 3 days, and they got blasted in the papers for, you know, over promising and under delivering under that old notion. So that was a good lesson for me to make sure that whatever date I give a client, we're always a little bit ahead of schedule, if you will.
Well, didn't you hear yesterday that there was a big outage of phones and electricity up in Canada, and the electric company that attributed it to a beaver that cut a tree down and took out the lines?
I would believe that. I would believe that.
I didn't hear that, but okay.
Amazing. Okay, one more. % of Americans say that they don't answer calls from unknown numbers.
93%.
97.
And 100% of people under 30 never answer their phone.
Under any condition.
That's
Well,
right.
it's actually 80.
Oh, 80.
For those 18 through 29 are also most likely to answer. They're actually the most likely to answer calls from unknown origins.
Wow.
That's
So
That's
who
like
knew?
because of Tinder or something.
Right. Exactly. Exactly, Kevin. Okay, so again, we've got Kevin back for part 3 of this, and he's going to be talking about hybrid workforce today. Fletch, we've got your classic slide.
Yep. And next week, so we're going to have just a reminder, if you do want an infomercial, we have these slots available every week on the Fireside Chat. Next week, we're going to have as our Vendor Advisory Council member is Uma, and that is on Tuesday. So make sure you're signed up for that. And that info will be going out very shortly from SCTC headquarters. Thanks, Steve.
Great. Thank you, Fletch. Okay, Fran, over to you.
Hello there. Every week we have a little bit different take on what we do for happy hour. We're going to have a twist this week. And this week, Roberta Fox is going to share her consultant interview. She gave us a sneak peek a couple weeks ago. She promised not to make me cry because it's, I guess it's pretty intense. So join us tomorrow to learn more during our happy hour. Thanks, Steve.
Are we allowed to have a beer or some kind of serious alcohol?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I've already started. No.
Okay, thanks.
Beverage.
Okay, let's not get too far ahead of schedule there, Fran.
We always have
All
a
right.
great time. Yep.
Thank you. And Denise.
Hi,
What-
everyone. Hope you're having a great week. First of all, I want to see what Fletch's t-shirt says. What is your t? I can't say what it is. I can't see. It's really small. I am cooler. What?
I'm cooler than anybody here.
Oh, see, there you go. Sorry. Wanted to just tap into the concept of it being an independent consultant. I was speaking with a colleague earlier today that really pointed out that an independent consultant can really make or break an opportunity for a vendor, in that, you know, a client may say, you know, I don't know if this is what we want to be buying from a certain vendor, but if we have an independent advocate or trusted advisor on our side, it can definitely make the opportunity go more smoothly. So value yourselves as independent consultants. I know that your clients value you, and join us if you are not a member, because there is so much opportunity and validation that you get from this organization as being an independent consultant, and it really can help your practice. So that's all I have today. Y'all have a great one.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, and I just got an opportunity through one of our vendor members to speak at a national conference at the end of the month on E911. So there we go. So it's the exposure of the SCC that, you know, drove that. So thank you, SCTC. Okay, so Kevin, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to hand you the slides.
Okay.
And we're looking forward to hearing from you today, Kevin.
Okay. Okey-dokey. Well, let me just get this up and going. Pick the right screen.
So Kevin, how old is Kai now?
Kai is 8. It's funny. He turned 8 like last week, and for whatever reason, and I think this is partly the pandemic, where time is warped. For a while, somebody, like, I don't know, somebody in my house or whatever, convinced me he was 9. So I'm telling everybody for the past year when we meet and go walking dogs, I'm like, he's 9. And now it's like, now all of a sudden he's 8. So he's doing what some of us want to do, which is reverse age. But no, he never was 9. He is 8 as of last week.
So Kevin, how did you come up with the name Kai?
I don't know. It just seemed like a strong kind of. I think it in different languages. I think it might mean like water in Hawaiian or something. Of course,
Okay.
I think it just sounded like a strong. He's a strong breed, so it seemed like a strong kind of name. It was short and strong, and you could see yourself yelling like "Here, Kai," and that kind of thing.
What's the spelling?
Kai.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've actually met people who now have that name, right? So.
Yeah, and it's only one syllable, so easy to say, easy to remember.
Yes, absolutely.
The dog is probably better behaved than the people with the name.
Well, and certainly my wife believes that dogs in general are better than most humans. So we have a sign to that effect that says something like my favorite humans are dogs or something. But there you go. So, but dogs are great if you train them, and so is teams if you do the training of your users. But
Hey,
yeah.
Kevin, a neat sign for you that I saw yesterday when I was picking up some eggs. It says, "Dogs welcome, people tolerated."
Yes, that's perfect. I'll look for that for my wife. So, well, let's talk a little bit about hybrid work trends. The third week, this will be in some ways the least about teams because it's mostly applicable to whatever you see in collaboration solutions. I would say it's probably hard to remember, but before the pandemic, most workplaces did not have a remote work policy. And even those that did, they might be okay if you wanted to work one day, maybe two at the most from home. In fact, in 2018, a study said that less than 10% of employees had the option to work a day or two a week from home. I think maybe leaders were worried that their employees would adopt what I'll call this Munchkin schedule. This is from the song from the Wizard of Oz. We get up at 12 and start to work at 1, take an hour for lunch, and then at 2 we're done. But it turned out that, in March of 2020, a vast majority of people were forced to work from home that had never worked remotely before. In the US, there was 164.6 million people working in February of 2020, just before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And, at that time, there was only 4.7 million people that worked remotely at least half the time. But during COVID, close to 70% of full-time workers ended up working from home. And similarly in Canada, there was this surge of an additional 4.7 million people. So 40% of the Canadian workforce was working from home during the pandemic, really for the first time. And as opposed to, leaders being worried about this Munchkin schedule and perhaps a corresponding drop in productivity, the reality was a lot different. As many were forced to work remotely, productivity by all accounts went up. There were more meetings, more email, more communication, 148% more meetings, 252% more time spent in meetings. And, as opposed to Munchkin time, there was actually a 28% increase in after hours work as compared to, pre-pandemic. Now, a lot of the stats that I'm going to share, they're from different sources, but a lot of them come from Microsoft put together this work trends index. Before the pandemic, there was like 25 different research projects going on in Microsoft, supposedly, just looking at different work styles. And so as the pandemic hit, they really consolidated those different research studies into this work trend index that they publish. So far, they published on an annual basis, so in 2021 and 2022. And they surveyed like 20,000 people in 20 countries worldwide because there's different cultural differences across the world. And then they brought all these stats together. You can just Google Work Trends Index, and there's a lot of fascinating statistics. I tried to curate some. I'm still Kevin Keeler. It is not that cold as it is. As I said, I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt. And I do all those things and Steve, thank you for that lovely introduction.
So Kevin, quick question on that picture, by the way.
Yes.
I heard you have some excellence in ventriloquism or something like that, so you let Kai talk on your behalf or something. I don't know.
I think that I haven't heard that myth, but there you go. But yes, I would like to try to teach Kai to speak. But so far we've taught him to kind of sing, which is just kind of his version of howling, right? Which is quite entertaining, and it's a lot more pleasant, I would say, than barking. So
You bet.
So, we know that many teams, many organizations rushed to Teams when the pandemic hit. And, I would say the growth of Teams, but it wasn't only Teams. I mean, we saw a huge growth in Zoom, huge, maybe less so growth in WebEx, but certainly, unified communications and collaboration solutions really kept organizations running. I think, Microsoft has shared all this growth in Teams, and Zoom showed the growth in Zoom. And, I think, there was usage growth, but I think the key thing was, and this is a stat from the BC Strategy Survey that Blair Pleasant and I, was published like November 2021. The key thing is this was asked about, unified communication and collaboration. Many people use Teams, some people use Zoom, some people use WebEx, some people use a combination like Slack. But, the key thing is did your new UC&C solution make you more productive and effective in your job? And this is all about business outcomes. And, 50% of people, said yes. So effectively, the majority found that this technology, and I would argue when properly deployed, made people more productive. And, I think what my message is in terms of considering the future of work and hybrid work is, people got through the last years and, people made do, and some thrive, some made do. But really now is the time for many organizations, for your clients, for your prospective clients, to make some strategic decisions to really support the future work model, which certainly will include some form of hybrid work. So let's talk a little bit about hybrid work. Now, anytime I talk about hybrid work, I think it's really important to acknowledge two things. Most of us have our own personal experiences, and that colors kind of how we see other things. And some people, this was, they had an easier time than others, depending on their living situation and how many people, their space and how many people share and their internet bandwidth. And the other thing is there's no lack of opinions about hybrid work. So I Googled hybrid work just before this. And so 18.5 million results. And then if you're not even sure, if you're saying, well, more broadly, I'm not sure about the whole future of work, well, then there's 142 million results that Google offers up. Now, I didn't go through all of those, but I tried to curate some from reputable sources. So we can at least have a basis, a foundation, in terms of talking about hybrid work. This first one comes from McKinsey, one of the leading consulting firms. And if you can look at, what the key takeaway is, hybrid work is here to stay, because pre-pandemic, less than half of the people, so 47%, were interested in some form of hybrid work. But now after, looking to the future preference, we have 75% of employees preferring some form of hybrid work going forward. So employees, key takeaway, employees are looking for some form of hybrid work. But the problem is, this is where hybrid is hard, because if you look at this, and Microsoft has labeled this the hybrid paradox. So 3/4 of the people want flexible remote options to stay. So they, are, interested in that remote. But then at the same time, almost 3/4 of people want more in-person work or collaboration post-pandemic. So it's kind of like, having your cake and eating it too. It's complicated. And I think, there's other studies that say things like the reason that people want to spend more time in the office. So 58% say, I plan to spend most of my time in the office because I'm going to go to the office to do focused work, because their work situation, or maybe they have kids or a spouse or whatever, have their remote working is not a place to do kind of that focused work. But then an exact same percentage, 58% say, look, I'm going to spend my least amount of time in my office because I can do more focused work at home. So certainly, there's a bit of a paradox in terms of what people want. And, not everybody wants the same thing. And so it's really tough being a manager, trying to manage this hybrid work. So outside of the technology, 50% of the leaders say their company is planning full-time in-person work in the year ahead. So managers are saying, hey, my executive leadership is telling me we're going to have to come back to the office. But then, the most of those, and there's other statistics to show that senior leaders, they really want to come back to the office, but 54% of these same managers say that leadership is out of touch with employee expectations. And yet these managers, 3/4 of them don't have the influence or resources to drive change for the employees. So this is a bit of a collision, and we see this a little bit, Elon Musk, it's fine to work remotely, provided you spend at least 44 hours a week in the office. So, it's and then other firms are saying, hey, it's fine for you to work remotely forever. So I would say that, as we look at hybrid work best practices, these are absolutely still evolving. And I think, this origami, there's going to be a lot of crumpled up attempts on what works for different organizations before they get to kind of the final product, because both people's expectations and their experiences are evolving. But I do think here are a few kind of best practices that are emerging. For sure, supporting hybrid work is a team sport. So, it's even broader. The team, participation is broader. Success happens when you've got, the IT group, yes, kind of championing the right technology, but certainly HR from, policies and procedures, and then a lot of facilities, because, when I get into the office, what I expect to do there and in the more collaborative space, a lot of times requires retooling, revamping, re-equipping of those facilities. So, success is happening at that intersection on the Venn diagram, of course, with the leader support and commitment around. So certainly this is more of a team sport than, UC has always been a team sport, but hybrid work even requires broader participation. And then, as I said, I always love these balloon people. Like, they always look so happy. They're like in front of whatever car dealerships or whatever. You kind of need to be like that balloon person. Your plans need to be flexible because employees are still sorting out what they want. I love this. The people that are working fully remote, 57%, so more than half, are considering that they want to shift to hybrid. So being remote, but also being in the office. And yet the people that are working hybrid, they're saying, so just over half are saying, what, I'm considering working fully remote. So once again, no one exactly knows what they want. And, the key takeaway is, if you want to be happy in terms of assisting organizations and be as happy as those balloon people look, I think you have to be, your plans have to be flexible. And also the infrastructure that you're putting in place needs to, take into consideration that the use cases and the wants and the desires that are expressed today, they may change over time. And then the other thing is really around success being both etiquette or rules and the enabling technology. So if you ask people that are working in this hybrid mode, 38% of hybrid workers say that the greatest challenge for hybrid is knowing when and why I need to come to the office, right? So it's like, I'm working hybrid, but I don't know, I'm partly remote and partly in office, but I'm not sure which days, what times. And so a big percentage of employees find that challenging, but only 28% of companies have created agreements and team norms around hybrid work. Mm-hmm. So certainly, this etiquette, this decision, this saying outside of the technology, what days is this team or our department going to be in the office? And then when people are remote, we still have the situation where 43% of remote workers don't feel included in the meetings. And similarly, 27%, so just a quarter, companies haven't really provided instruction or come up with rules and provided guidance in terms of how do you run a meeting when you've got people both remote and in the office, recognizing that almost every meeting now is going to be that type of hybrid meeting. So only 27% of organizations have really established that new meeting etiquette. And employees, of course, are, they're willing to go into the office, but they're, demanding more because they've spent 2 years figuring out that, yeah, my health and my well-being I'm going to prioritize that more heavily than I did. And even up to, the fact of I'm considering changing roles or changing organizations because I know I can be productive and deliver, but I don't need to necessarily do it, with 40 plus hours in the office.
Mhm.
Kevin, I'll say that my productivity has gone down now that I'm traveling again.
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing because productivity went up because people often gained as many as 2 hours, right? Where they're commuting, right? So now it's as people travel more, they go, wait a second, I either have to work really long hours now to make up for the time when I'm traveling, I can't do as much work, whereas when I was just at home, I got more done, right? So absolutely valid point. So here's some hybrid work focus areas that I would suggest. Hybrid, first of all, hybrid anything is really hard. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. It is actually easier from a technology and from every other aspect when people are either all remote, which we've gone through. That was easier than having, half the people. You kind of think about it like a restaurant. Like if everybody's coming in, you know how many tables you have, the maximum capacity. As soon as you open up to takeout, now all of a sudden your capacity could, you could get more takeout orders, right? And as well, you've got this expectation thing. The people that, maybe regular customers that loved a particular dish, now you got to have things to package it up. Maybe it was great when it was in the restaurant, but getting for example, French fries home and crispy, that doesn't work well. So now, people order things, they bring it out and they're disappointed. And I think that, that's what's happening a little bit as people kind of come into the office or work from home. So, one of the things to focus on is, okay, people may do, they scrambled, they sometimes went to the office and got a monitor or brought an office chair home or whatever, bought headsets or microphones or whatever they may do. But really, now I call it home office 2.0. It's really let's make strategic decisions around making sure that people have the right headsets, microphones, video, lighting, even docking stations, so that as they're transitioning, right? It was easier when they didn't have to move things, but now if they're being asked to come into the office some days, even things like laptop bags and backpacks, how do they move this equipment? Do you want them to move the equipment, or maybe you buy them 2 headsets, because 2 power supplies, because inevitably they're going to leave one at the office and now they don't have one at home. So I'm certainly making a strategic decision. Different organizations are looking at stipends and different ways to make sure that people have what they need to be productive and to represent your brand. So if you're sales and you're on a meeting, a video meeting, make sure that you represent the brand well when they're at home. And then there's a lot of talk, and of course vendors talk a lot about this because in some ways this means retooling, office equipment, and so they want to sell you more stuff. So they talk about meeting equity, so the ability to engage remote participants, because remember, 43% of remote workers said they do not feel included in meetings. But I'm going to say it's even broader than meeting equity, because I think it's more about experience equity, because there are some cases where in-person meeting attendees don't have as good of an experience as remote attendees. Because when you're a remote attendee, like all of you, for example, if I say something you have got your laptop, you can Google, look up something, you can have a back channel chat if you're disagreeing, whereas when you're sitting in a meeting room, you may not have access to some of those things. Although I'll talk a little bit about how some of the vendors are trying to bring the best of the remote participant experience into the meeting room as well, because remote attendees as well, you have multiple monitors. And so, for example, it really is when you get to the office, you're going to, if you've equipped your desk at home with 2, so I've seen pictures of 3 monitors, people expect that they get into the office and they're going to have access to all that kind of thing. So, experience equity, and that's what makes hybrid work hard, both on the meetings, but also the working spaces is the expectations. And then, the third area to focus on is really helping, with all this fancy, hardware and software technology and the evolution of it. I call it, and I've mentioned this in the previous 2 weeks, taming teams, but more generally, it's really about taming your tools. It's really about leveraging the capabilities that you have so you get this unruly husky who is really just chewing grass. He never looks that fierce. He was chewing grass and I took the picture at the right time. But, you get this unruly technology or this, this powerful technology, to be this nice, compliant, well-used and well-behaving technology. And, as part of this, this says Teams makes many more productive, and it does. But once again, it's really UC. And initially, I called this out and I said, hey, this is great. This is 50% of the people found it's more productive. But, the other 50% of the people that, were either unsure or said no, this is really the potential. This is really about, where you can tame teams. And, I heard the chat ahead of this, ahead of noon, just saying a lot more people are using Teams even in this group. And the real potential is to use it effectively. So I focus on that additional 50%. And that's really where the opportunity lies. And there is this huge untapped unified communications and collaboration potential for hybrid work, because when Blair and I in our study asked, do you feel you have a good understanding of your UC&C solution? And this is whether you're using Teams or Zoom or WebEx or Slack. Here's the thing, 65% of the people said, no, I don't have a good understanding of all of those features. And that number is not going to go down by itself. In fact, many of the people from the yes might transition to no, because, whether it's from Zoom or Cisco or Microsoft or others, the evolution of the software tech and the hardware technology continues to evolve rapidly. Now, I included, this is the Microsoft 365 roadmap, because Microsoft, it's not as easy to find the Cisco roadmap and the Zoom roadmap, but Microsoft publishes this. And so you can see that the average is you get 30 plus features launched pretty much every month. And that's not unique to Microsoft. That's happening with the other vendors. So even if you are in the yes column and said, yeah, I'm good, I understand all those features. 1 month goes by, 30 new features. The next month, if you wait a quarter, there's 90 new features, 300 features plus over the course of a year. And if we look at what, kind of the vendors are doing, and these are Microsoft specific examples, but on the next slide, I'll call out, some ones that are also happening across other vendors. Here, for example, this is interesting. This is simple. This is really an Outlook feature, but it's a simple thing. But we heard that like 38% of the people working remotely, one of their biggest challenges was knowing when to go into the office. And so here's a feature that just came out. When you RSVP in Outlook, you can say, yeah, so I'm attending that meeting, but you can also, as circled in that red circle, you can indicate whether you're attending online or in person. Because a lot of us want to go into the office, but we don't want to go to see our colleagues. We don't want to go into the office and sit there in a meeting that we could have just taken from home, because, as was brought up earlier, that lowers your productivity because you're commuting. And then you can also, in Outlook now, set working hours and indicate, if you have like this hybrid or regular schedule, you can indicate when you're working remotely. So once again, other people can understand if they want to meet up with you, oh, I see Kevin is, he works remotely, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and he's in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So a simple feature, but, something I think interesting. This is interesting because most organizations use Microsoft Exchange and Outlook for calendaring. So this impacts most people. In terms of the hybrid meeting features, we're seeing a bunch of things that are trying to address that meeting equity. So I mentioned that sometimes remote participants have different things that they can do. Well, for instance, with Teams and WebEx offers something similar, but in Teams it's called companion mode, which means that in the room I can use my mobile device to interact even if I don't bring my laptop. So I can send emojis to say, hey, I like what something's saying. I can do some, chats. I can see the chat. I can sometimes start meetings with your mobile device to have a touchless experience. As well, people are looking at, Microsoft calls it front row, and this is this image here, where it makes people look more like they're in the room. I mean, this looks very similar to Cisco telepresence, where we kind of tried to make everybody look kind of in the room. So those, in this picture here, you see the remote participants, it kind of takes their background away and just puts them on the lower part. And also the screen, lets everybody in the rooms be able to see the chat easier. The deployment of intelligent speakers, this, works with both, Teams and Zoom and WebEx as well. The idea is to do a speaker identification. So for the remote participants, it can be, if you don't know the people in the room, it can be hard to know who's talking. So intelligent speakers, try to identify the voice, and then in the transcript, they can show you who's speaking. And then lastly, all of the vendors are bringing intelligent cameras, which really, as opposed to showing just one picture for all the people in the room, we've gotten used to everybody in their own little square, like we see on this Zoom meeting. These intelligent cameras can take each person in the room and do AI to do auto framing, so that everybody in the room, even though there's 6 people in the room, each person gets their own square. So the remote participants have a better ability to see, everybody together. So these are, some of the features that vendors are looking at. I would say collectively, there's kind of like an arms race. So one person announces it and then somebody else follows. For example, Microsoft had together mode and Zoom had immersive mode. So pretty much everybody comes up with the features eventually. But once again, and I repeat this, I said this last week, with all this new software and hardware technology, what unlocks the potential, like deploying it isn't good enough. Really, you need to train users, because once again, 72% of users felt they would be more effective with additional training. And remember, month over month, 30 plus new features are coming out. And I shared this as well last week, just around training. I wanted to add another truth, and this is specific to Microsoft Teams, because this came up in the kind of the poll. Microsoft Teams, and I said this, I think, in my 2021 Sctc presentation, but certainly for many organizations, there can be debate about this, but definitely for many organizations, it is true that Microsoft Teams can serve as an enterprise PBX. It doesn't have every feature. So if you have an old RFP template that lists every feature known to, from the beginning of time, telephony feature, yes, Microsoft Teams doesn't have that. I would argue it has the most important features. And yet, when we poll people about why Teams doesn't necessarily meet the requirements, we see that, people still believe it has inadequate features, which is perfectly fine. And certainly in some organizations, it may very well. But I think that maybe people haven't caught up or kept up. If there's all these features being released, Teams 5 years ago was sorely lacking features. I would say it has, greatly improved in terms of bringing that. And as well, there's also this huge ecosystem around, and it's, around certainly Microsoft and Zoom. Cisco has their own kind of more closed ecosystem. but there is ways to address those kind of whatever features you feel are lacking through the ecosystem. Because I think the thing is, and this is really the opportunity for us collectively, you know, why would you now especially consider your UC platform and your collaboration platform, which are often one, as your phone system? And there's a couple of trends. You know, PSTN calling is less important to many because what we're seeing is unscheduled calls like that, you know, whether you answer a call from an unknown number, but unscheduled calls are dropping and meetings are increasing. So, you know, a lot of times now, even if it's a call, like there's just two people, that's being scheduled as a meeting. And as soon as it's scheduled as a meeting through a UC system, it almost always is a voice over IP. And as part of that, then, you know, this bundle proposition, which obviously Microsoft plays on, but it's a, you know, attributable and applicable to other vendors. You have cost savings when your collaboration tool, your, you know, the chat tool, your document storage tool, your calling tool, when that's all one, because it brings the user experience together and it provides, you know, easier IT administration as opposed to trying to administer, you know, multiple reporting tools and that type of thing. And all of these tools fully support hybrid work because if you know how to use it remotely, you'd use it in the same way when you go to the office. And this may not be a good news story for people that want to sell desk phones, because if you work a couple of days from home and you don't have a desk phone at home and you're productive, there's less of an argument that all of a sudden when you show up at the office that you need a desk phone there. And in fact, the desk phones work different. So now you have to train people on using different tools. So unless there's specific use cases that require it, you know, UCNC, which is by definition portable and works on multiple devices wherever you are, is very good match for hybrid work. There is certainly with Teams, as I mentioned, almost a limitless ecosystem, both of hardware and software that you can plug in to address specific use cases. And certainly communication and collaboration has become much more than voice, where voice was the center and built out. Now voice is really a feature. And a lot of times, like I'll say, I've had a discussion, you know, I had a call or with somebody, but it could have been just a series of text messages. It could have been a chat, right? I mean, a call means, or a meeting means many different things. So certainly, you know, as hybrid work is going to be with us, UCNC solutions are a great solution for that. But, you
Evan,
know, yeah.
So question for you, with that dynamic change happening, and I totally agree with what you're saying, does that from a corporate real estate perspective change the design of our meeting rooms to where you need to be, instead of around a table necessarily, but forward facing a camera or multiple cameras? And do you have to start to account for different technology now to facilitate a better meeting experience now that it's hybrid? Because we've not designed the rooms for that.
Yeah, and the slides that I pulled here, you can see it's got Ribbon Poly Microsoft at the bottom. This was from a keynote at the new Microsoft Toronto headquarters, and certainly Poly was there presenting as well. And they would 100% argue, and talking to multiple facilities people, they are reconfiguring, right, rooms. And, you know, often now these better cameras, it's just one camera that can do, you know, you don't need multiple cameras to do the, you know, the show the whiteboard as well as show the individuals, but you need a newer camera, right? So absolutely that reconfiguration is going on. And I think, you know, the stats are great, and you know, I love sharing these broad stats, but the key for one organization is to figure out how their employees intend to use the office, because I think that that's what's going to guide how, in conjunction with facilities, the rooms need to be potentially, you know, reconfigured depending on what they look like. A lot of rooms don't have video devices or displays, those smaller huddle rooms, because it assumed that everybody was in the office, and if you have a small meeting, you just go to the huddle room. I think now it's, you know, likely that more of those rooms will require both a display and some type of a video camera as well.
Well, yeah, and huddle rooms are an excellent example because a lot of places reconfigured for huddle room technology, but the pandemic changed the use case, I think, of the huddle room.
Right.
Not that the huddle room was a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think once again, I mean, and this is, I'm going to go to my next slide just for time, but I think, Dr. Seuss always has some good guidance. And I'm going to say that this is around reconfiguration, around why you need to be flexible. This is from this, I love this book, All the Places You'll Go. And this applies to hybrid work. I'm sorry to say, but sadly it's true that bang-ups and hang-ups with hybrid work can happen to you. So I think we need to be flexible and we need to see how people are using the spaces. And really, analytics, you need to figure out what's working, and you need to be both looking at behavioral metrics, which if you use Office 365, it captures a lot of behavioral metrics. You need to looking who's badging in, when are they badging in? So facilities has a bunch of metrics. And as well, you need to do sentiment analysis. You need to continue to ask, organizations need to ask their employees what's working and what's not working, because this is, we asked in our Blair and my study, right now, organizations are not, asking around, and they're not tracking usage and adoption or quality, reliability, or user satisfaction. And that's going to be a problem if you're trying to solve for hybrid work. And so, I listed some of the feedback tools. There's a lot built into Office 365 that IT pros aren't using. Nobody's tasked to look at these. And then, I think surveying people, ask them if this is working for them and ask them what's not working for them. Because that's really the key to supporting hybrid work. Because, in summary, hybrid work is going to be here. And it's, success requires the technical skills, the policies, so in support of HR and experience. Microsoft Teams and other UC solutions are perfectly, matched to this hybrid work because they let you work wherever you are. And, once again, I'm a huge advocate of this ongoing training. I know there was mention of some of those links that I sent out after last time, because there's, but you also have to have the material, but you need to, allocate a little bit of time to keep up to date. And if you're a leader, you need to make sure that your people have time in their schedules to be able to keep up to date on how this new technology works. And once again, really use analytics to pinpoint what is working and, what's not working. If you deploy some wonderful stuff and nobody's using it, you've got some more work, whether that's communication or change management or training. But, once again, success and return on investment is obviously driven by usage and adoption, and analytics really tells you if you're being successful. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Steve, and say
Thanks, Kevin. Sorry about that. So can you just go back to slide 30 for a second for Chuck, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, one more. Thanks.
This one?
Okay, Chuck. No, one more ahead. No, the eye chart. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, this one. Yeah.
No, the eye chart. The one previous.
Oh, this one. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a screenshot. I know I can get this, being an SCTC member, I can get this online, but this is very topical to something I'm working on right now. So I'm going to take a little snip of this and
there you go. Yeah, and it's actually, and just while you're doing this, because I got an article that's just being edited by Lisa No Jitter that talks about Teams phone users and phone system license. And the one thing I would just point out is there's another, and Chuck, if you send me an email, I'll try to remember, but send me an email because I can send you a link to where Microsoft also says what is included with the phone system license. The only thing that I would say is, some of these things you get even without a phone system license, right? So Microsoft lists so it is a little bit, takes a little bit of work to decode, what do you need to buy a phone system license for?
okay. Hey, and Steve and Kevin, I don't know if we have a part 4, but a topic that would be very useful to, I know, my company, and I'm guessing others, is if we like Teams, but we feel like we want to maybe look at a direct routing approach. There's people out there like New Wave, like Call Tower, like Evolve IP.
Yep.
Everybody out there says we're the guys to sell you Teams, and you know, yet we're scrambling around going, you can't all be the best. You can't all be the exclusive perfect solution. Love to hear your take on, some of the different partners that provide Teams through their own UC platform.
Yeah. And by the way, Bandwidth does it too, one of our VAC members.
Yeah. And just to be clear on that, they're not providing Teams, they're providing the PSTN connectivity, right?
Correct.
So all of those people, so like I've worked with Call Tower, they provide Operator Connect direct routing, as does New Wave, as does Evolve IP, as does Bandwidth, as does Intellipeer. So they're just providing that PSTN connectivity piece.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you can get it from Microsoft as calling plans, you can get it from direct routing with a session border controller from 1 million people, and you can get it as Operator Connect from a whole bunch of other people as well.
Yeah, but we could benefit from a session just on all that stuff.
Yeah, I'll get that together, Chuck, for sure. Yeah, I actually did a session on that several months ago with Bandwidth.
Perfect.
Okay, so yeah, we can definitely put that onto the calendar. Okay. So any other questions? Oh, hold on, there is another question, Kevin.
Okay.
So Jennifer asks, sorry, I just got to pull it up. So what features do you think are needed to make hybrid work simpler, which you do not see being by or other vendors? A lot of question. Thanks, Jennifer.
So I'm a big believer, like I will tell people that like for the next 5 years, I could come into an organization and if there was no more features released, I could, make people happy by introducing them to new features. So I think, I don't think it's a lack of features. I think it's a lack of awareness of the features and then, working with the organization to match the feature to the particular use case.
Yeah.
So I think right now the vendors, they're in the battle to keep one-upping with the features, and they're going to convince you that somebody's missing a feature. I think that if you pick any of these leading platforms, success is more about the implementation piece and how do you match what it does with what the users are doing on a daily basis to make their life a little better.
Absolutely. That's great. Anybody else have any other questions for Kevin? Don't all ask him at once, please. We have some bakery tickets to hand out to you, Kevin. Some more questions. All right. Well, hey, it's at the top of the hour. So again, we wanted to thank everybody for attending again today. Kevin, thanks for a feature-rich presentation once again. And thanks everyone for joining, and we'll all be in touch. And thanks again, Kevin. It was a great session, of course.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.